The Chicago Tribune editorial board is out with a new piece entitled Honor D-Day's 75th Anniversary by Knowing the Story and Teaching Others. The board writes in part this: all great historical achievements risk fading into obscure past events, reduced to calendar notations or unread Wikipedia entries, unless those moments are kept vivid and meaningful for future generations. June 6th is one of those imperiled dates. It's the 75th anniversary of D-Day, one of the most audacious military actions in American history. This tale of valor and sacrifice has become more important to retell because those who fought that war and learned its lessons of selfless service for the common good are disappearing. More than 16 million Americans served in the military during the war. Fewer than 500,000 veterans are still alive. Most are now in their mid-90s. Younger generations of Americans won't understand what happened on June 6, 1944, unless they are inspired to learn it. If you know the D-Day story, share it and teach it, and you notice a difference. You were here for the 60th,
right? And
there's so fewer veterans here, so fewer stories to be told from those who were there.
There really are. When we were here for the 60th, and dignitaries will continue arriving. When we were here for the 60th anniversary, there were so many more veterans here, and we would walk through the streets of small towns across Normandy. And you would have, it was one of the more touching moments of my life, watching young children, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children with flowers in their hands being pushed in the direction of these veterans, then in their 70s, some in their late 70s. And the children would say, my parents and grandparents have told me we are free because of what you did on this day. And you would have actually everybody in tears, whether it was the veterans, of course, who were weeping, the young children, the parents. It was extraordinarily moving. And Michael, it's a good reminder when people ask, are we going to be okay? Which we Americans seem to ask every year. It just depends on what side you're on.
Right.
But 2004, I would actually say that our alliances were even more strained then. We had just begun the Iraq War. Chirac and Schroeder, for the Germans and the French, were decidedly working actively against that war and American interest in the United Nations, and the two sides did not like each other. And yet, not only the French in Normandy, but also the French in Paris went out of their way to tell Americans then as now, we may not like your president, but we love you. We love Americans, and that is Macron arriving right now. Michael.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Joe. And, you know, look at how powerful the influence of our alliance is that Donald Trump, at least from the excerpts of the speech that we have learned about so far, feels compelled to make a speech that sounds, at least from the excerpts, a little bit similar from those other presidents back to Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, who celebrated the heroism of D-Day.
And let us hope that is the case here too. Of course,
for sure,
we do. Many people who have issues with the Trump presidency at times will grade him on a curve. But if in fact you are not a fan of Donald Trump and you are grading him on a curve, you certainly look at some of his remarks in Britain, at least, and to Theresa May, and they were actually far more gracious than has been the case in the past. And David, let us certainly hope that is the case again today.
You know, the fact that President Trump is here, I want to say, to worship at the altar of this great sacrifice. You know, we want him to speak well and powerfully. Watching President Macron, thinking about what D-Day meant for France, I always think of a person I interviewed who was a French spy, spying for the British, who spent the last year of the war in German concentration camps. And she describes what it was like after D-Day for the French. here she was suffering near death in the concentration camp, and she said, "We knew now that the Allies were coming. We knew that they were coming, the Americans and the others, to save France." I look at President Trump and President Macron speaking now, and I think French understand that. As much friction as there sometimes is between our countries, they understand what America was prepared to do for France then. They've never forgotten it.
Well, we're looking now, the program is getting ready to begin. We're about 30 minutes behind schedule. President Trump and First Lady Melania and French President Macron and Brigitte are going to walk through now, as you see, the honor cordon of U.S., French military personnel, and they are heading toward the stage where the program will begin.
And Mike, we look again at President Trump and President Macron, two presidents who, in their own way, have been struggling with domestic political strains. President Trump, who actually is faring better today as far as polls go than he has in some time, but President Macron, who has been the target of months of protests that have been disruptive to his country.
Yeah, the Yellow Jackets looking for pay equity and better benefits in France have vandalized Paris most weekends for several months. But in an odd way, the day is bigger than both of those men. It's just bigger.
Yeah.
And you hope and pray that the President of the United States lives up to this moment, because it is a moment, and it requires empathy, it requires understanding, it requires some semblance, a little knowledge of what occurred here, the cost of what occurred here. And you pray that it has had an impact on him prior to his remarks. We'll see.
Well, and again, Michael Beschloss, we are reminded, as Mike says, that this event is bigger than these two gentlemen. You, of course, heard many people saying the same thing of Bush and Chirac 15 years ago. And here we are 15 years later, and we do keep moving forward as an alliance. And let us hope we will be here 15 years from now.
Yeah, you know,
with the Western Alliance just as strong.
Absolutely right. And in 1966, Charles de Gaulle was, getting very eager to, get rid of some of the offices of the alliance and to throw them out of Paris. And he said this to Secretary of State Dean Rusk, and Rusk said, "Do you want us to take the graves too, take them back to the United States?" Rusk said that knowing that de Gaulle would essentially say, all right, there are limits to this, which he did. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Dean Acheson was sent by President Kennedy to show the evidence of Soviet missiles in Cuba to de Gaulle, and de Gaulle said, "Don't even take your pictures out of your briefcase. We trust you, Americans."
We're about to watch the posting of the colors, and then both anthems, the French national anthem will be followed by the U.S. national anthem, the invocation, and then, of course, the remarks by both the French president and President Trump.
As we're watching the presidents of France and the United States
greet
these heroes, these veterans, these remarkable men, these band of brothers. David, wow. Mika and I actually saw, and it was an NBC video. We actually saw a 97-year-old D-Day veteran parachute down, in tandem this time, of course, to the same spot where he had parachuted 75 years ago. He fell to the ground, but then when he got up, he said, well, it's not much different than that night because it was dark. And I tried to hit my feet, but what we don't understand today is how heavy the equipment was they were carrying. It knocked him immediately to his ground 75 years ago.
It's so wonderful to see these veterans who are still alive and still here with a spirit that would make someone parachute down. Mike and I this morning were talking to a veteran from New Jersey who was just joking. He was hiding behind former Secretary of State Kerry, and tall NBC anchor as saying, "That's how I survived." And he just he just had an irrepressible spirit. And
at 93.
At 93, I just have to say, this is probably the last D-Day anniversary in which veterans will be alive in a significant way. And that's one reason we should really cherish every moment today, because I don't know that we'll have this again in the same way. This generation, sadly, is leaving us.
And the Alex told us that the veteran who made that jump was 97-year-old Tom Rice. But Mike, what are your reflections? This is the fourth D-Day celebration that you've attended.
You know, Joe, each of the times I've been here to cover it or bringing my family here, I find it an overwhelming sight because of the knowledge of what went in here. And it strikes you, or at least it strikes me, when you stop at individual headstones. Last night, David and I were here at dusk, and I stopped at one headstone, a young man from South Dakota. And I looked him up after we left here, tried to find the family history, and he was just a little over the age of 18 when he was killed on June 6, 1944. And you wonder, what would bring a young man at 18 from South Dakota all the way here to Omaha Beach to die for your country, which is what they all did. They died for the person next to him in the Higgins boats as they landed. They died for the friends they made, but they died for our country.
And here now begins the French national anthem.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.